Hello everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to once again be joined by Bryant, a composer who's taken the film music world by storm. He has written the music for films such as Frailty, Iron Man 3, John Rambo, The Expendables, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Now You See Me, The Mummy, and many more. Brian's ability to write both powerful and highly emotional music has catapulted him right into the A-list of Hollywood's film composers. He has recently written the music for the drama television series Yellowstone, directed by Taylor Sheridan, and also the film Crazy Rich Asians by John Chu. Welcome back, Brian.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Great to have you back, and thank you for your time. Um,
Yes.
Brian, before we get to talk about those movies, or respectively one movie, one TV series, I would like to talk about your concert music because I've learned recently that on October 25th you will actually return to the Royal Festival Hall in London.
Yes, that's going
Yes.
to be really great. Very excited about that concert. It's going to be very expansive where it covers even more music and big themes. And I'm also talking to people about, kind of throwing it back out there for film score fans also and wondering what they want to hear. And we've been working really hard to make a great program of new things and uh, old things and everything in between. So it's going to be amazing. Big orchestra and choir. It's going to sound incredible.
Right. Uh, will you primarily play suites, or will you also play, selected cues of each score?
Both. Both. There's some really interesting suites we're doing specifically just for the show, and then there are cues as well that we're looking to do that are going to be in totality, and which is great is because a lot of the music when it was recorded for these films, it's going to be the same people that will be playing in the orchestra on that night. So because it's the Philharmonia Orchestra of London, so which I used on so many movies, everything from Avengers: Age of Ultron and Thor, and more recently, the Mummy, Power Rangers, the Formula One theme. So all of these. It's really great getting back together with the players that I work with so much in London on the actual scores. So it's like family.
The last time we spoke, we also, or you had actually indicated that you had also plans to prepare a full concert tour. Has there been any development on that?
Yes, there is. That's all in the works. We're figuring out how that fits in with my scoring schedule. Is always the trickiest part. But that's going to be happening, and there'll be dates and announcements soon. But it's kind of the kickoff for that is the London concert, and we're very excited to get going on it.
Right. Uh, how do you actually decide which scores will work the best for concert hall performance?
I find that that's a very interesting question, actually, because it's not necessarily what you would think. Well, it is in a sense. It's a yes and no, right? um, there are pieces that the ones that translate the most easily are the scores that I've written. The scores that I've written that are primarily orchestral and performed exactly as they are. The sheet music that I wrote for the pieces of music in the films, you could give that to an orchestra and they could perform it. The way I like to record orchestras is that I want to be able to push the boundaries of performance, the limit of performance, but I don't treat the orchestra like a computer. I treat the orchestra like an orchestra. So they're able to play it. There are certain things you can do with recording where the orchestra does things that uh, crossing lines that aren't really things that musically happen in real life, and that's just something that is a preference of mine. So in that sense, those really work well. And if you have something that's exciting and emotional, and really can tell a story by just sound, those are the ones that pop out to me immediately. The other, I guess, 25% of what I do score-wise are these scores that have a lot of production combined with orchestra, or sometimes there is no orchestra. It's like I'm doing a score called Escape Room, or the score for Break, or some of Far Cry. It's more like an album, like recording a Radiohead album or something like that, where you have many, many, many tracks individually recorded in the studio. That's much more difficult, but I find that to be a challenge that I like to approach. So even with having a concert like we're having in London, or for the tour, I want to combine doing full orchestral pieces, but then also do things that are very difficult to recreate. And I find it a challenge, but I find it that I don't want to just kind of do what's easy. I want to do what represents the music the best in my career the best, and for fans of mine get to hear everything in terms of the stylistic range. And that's why, for instance, doing Far Cry is something that has been a part of it, or Assassin's Creed, and these involve a lot of different instrumentations. Fast and Furious, these types of scores are very difficult to kind of recreate on stage, but I think worth doing.
Right. I hope The Mummy will be included in the concert.
Yeah, The Mummy is one that it really is kind of customized for, or it, like, it belongs being on stage. It's just the style of the music, It's very the style of certain scores that I write, it varies, but that has a very concert feel, where the melodies are big and the orchestra and the choir, they all come together to create a really big themes. And I think it's frenetic and fun to listen and also watch, just the string players play and the brass players and the percussion and everything working together. It has kind of a visual aspect to it as well. So that is definitely, we're working on something very special for that.
I mean, I consider The Mummy to be one of your finest efforts to date.
Thank you very much. That one, was a big challenge, and so for sure you're going to be hearing that.
Besides scoring for film, you also wrote the theme for the US Open, which is called Triumph of the Spirits. You wrote the theme for the Winter Olympics 2018 called Heroes Unite, and also recently Formula One. All of those themes perfectly captured the spirit of the respective events. How do you actually find the inspiration to nail that musically?
Yeah, these are, I appreciate it. I mean, I think it's because I am a fan of sports, and I love the drama of sports, because it's real. So it's almost like watching, real life that has an added extra amount of drama to it. So it plays to my kind of cinematic, dramatic narrative kid inside, while at the same time it's just a marvel to look at. So, for instance, I'm a huge Formula One fan.
Yeah.
And of course I watch the Olympics, and I'm a big fan of that too. But Formula One in particular, I have been watching since I was a kid, and I am fanatical about it. I watch practice, qualification, race, like every weekend that it's on, and I'm just kind of, really know each. It's almost like a movie for me, an ongoing movie, because I know all the drivers I don't know them personally. I know their stories, and I follow their stories, and it's got this great amount of drama and emotion to it, especially when, your driver has victory within their grasp, and then at the last second it all falls away from you. That kind of highs and lows in the emotions of watching the sport, it plays into it. In the music, I wanted to capture that. I think that for someone that is casually familiar with something like Formula One would say, "Oh, well, why don't you do something just big and energetic and frenetic, and it's all about energy?" But that really doesn't capture this. That does a disservice to I think Formula One. What Formula One needs is emotion, and that's why that whole middle section of the Formula One theme is all about kind of the history of Formula One and the tragedies that have happened and the drivers we've lost, but also the amazing victories against all odds that have happened. It's not kinetic energy, it's emotion. So for me, that's what I pour into anytime I'm doing a sports related theme. I think that's the most important part of it, to wear your heart on your sleeve and not be afraid to shed a tear. So that was certainly what I went for on all of those, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to the Formula One theme countless times, and it totally captures the essence of the whole sport. And it's also very catchy to boot. It's very yeah.
It had to be both. That was actually quite the challenge. I remember sitting down to write that and thinking about the responsibility, and here I am venturing into a world of fans that may or probably don't know me, and here I am writing this theme, which is such an important part of, I realized the responsibility. So I sat down, and really it was me watching footage from the history of Formula One through the years, everything from, all the way back to Fangio to, the Senna, and then the tragedy with Senna and the Schumacher, and all the way through, and Lewis Hamilton's incredible first win, a championship, which was the second year, and during that he won the entire championship on the last corner of the last race, like the last lap, last corner, last race with seconds left, and he captures it by 1 point. It was like a miracle, things like that. Those are the things that inspired me to do it, but I really wanted something that was both catchy, had a hook, so you could play 4 seconds of it at the beginning of a race, and people would say, "Oh, the race is on," if they're in the kitchen or something, and they, and also the more the longer, more epic suite, which kind of tells the story of Formula One and the history of it a bit more.
Brian, I would like to talk a little bit about the Yellowstone series, which you scored for Paramount Network.
Yes.
As I understand, there are 9 episodes the first season.
Yes.
Did you actually revisit some scores of the past, some Western scores, like Morricone or Bruce Broughton, James Newton Howard? How did you find the inspiration to write the music for the Western series?
I'm a huge film score fan. The 3 people you just named are some of I've listened to them more than you can even know. You just happen to name 3 of my favorites. The thing with this one, though, was a bit different. When Taylor Sheridan is the director, writer, he was approaching it very differently. At the time when we talked, it was he was really doing, how he was approaching it was doing a 9-hour movie. Very rarely do you get a writer-director like Taylor Sheridan to go in and direct and write every single second of every episode. And in a sense, I think they were initially thinking, he would do the first episode, the 2-hour pilot, like a movie, and then you hand it off to, but he wanted to approach it like a whole. So he shot it just like a 9-hour movie, and he wanted me to do the same. This is why I'm so tired, because we just finished. Because it was like doing a 9-hour movie. It wasn't kind of type of thing where you build a library and you kind of do it like a show approach. This was not that. It wasn't the type of thing. And also, the entire show is completely live orchestra. And so this presents a challenge. The other challenge, which I relish, by the way, I love these kind of wild challenges. The other aspect of this was what is the style of the music? Like you said, what was I inspired by? And Taylor and I, I had this idea, and Taylor was on board as well, which was I didn't want to kind of be necessarily directly inspired by Western scores that came before. Those are amazing. You have kind of the more Aaron Coplandish type of scores that turned into more of the what you call Americana scores, like you were talking about, Broughton. Then you had kind of the modern take on that, like with with James Newton Howard and his great scores. In fact, one of them had Costner in it, as you might, which was kind of like a future cowboy kind of thing. And then you had, of course, the Morricone, the spaghetti westerns and the very interesting, eclectic kind of scores with instruments that turned the whole genre on its head. So those had been done. So those weren't what we were looking towards at all. Instead, we thought, what's interesting is this is a contemporary tale. So it takes place now, but it is kind of a Western in the sense that it's this story of ranchers versus landowners, billionaires, and it's this really modern take on it. It's not so much a Western where it's strictly kind of those things. The storyline fits into things about greed and power and family and tragedy and loss and these things, and they're kind of in that range. So in that sense, the Yellowstone is primarily kind of a saga. And this saga, the story felt like I was saying, gosh, this really feels Shakespearean. It's almost mythological too. It's maybe even older than Shakespearean, like kind of, like the Homer and epics like that. So what I did was I thought, well, it is in America, but what is the Western, the Old West, that music? Where does that come from? America's a land of immigrants. We're all newbies here, and we all came from somewhere. And the music we associated with the Old West is really immigrants' music. It's primarily what we kind of think of as the fiddle and the that kind of drawling Old West music is a combination of Irish immigrants, Scottish, English, Turkish, Russian immigrants, the people that came from over there, and they brought their instruments. And like I said, is when I was talking about it, the sound we know as the Old West is kind of like there is, for instance, a fiddle solo that we would associate with kind of the Old West. That's really probably its origins are closer to maybe a Hungarian violinist family who handed down when they immigrated from Hungary to the United States and gave their son or daughter a violin, and it eventually became what we know as a fiddle, right? It's more kind of gypsy music in a sense, where you're walking along the plains out and the sun is beating down on your head and you need to entertain people. So you thought, well, my mother or my grandfather was a violinist. I kind of know how to play. I'll play this. And they may know, and then there's maybe a neighbor that also has a violin or fiddle, but they know Irish jigs, and they don't know Mozart. They know, jigs, and this music combined to create what we know as American Old Western music. So I actually studied a lot more. I went back, and the dulcimers and the fiddles and the harmoniums and the dulcitones and instruments like that from Europe, right on the eve of when people began to immigrate to the United States. So there's a very long-winded answer to I was really listening to more both Eastern European classical music, which I felt gave the mythological, the Russian composers and all that, gave it a very much a stern, stoic powerful, emotional, minor keyed type of thing to that, and then a lot of folk music melodies as well from everywhere from Turkey to Ireland and even kind of these Israeli ones and just different kind of folk melodies, anything that felt like ancient, and combine them all with the instrumentation of what was the progenitors of the Old West. So sometimes it actually feels very kind of like, oh, this is Old West, but really it's being done just slightly earlier. It's slightly older in style than we would consider, quote, Western score.
Right. I mean, the music sounds very melancholy. You get a certain Western vibe, certain Western touch, especially
Yes.
when I'm listening to the main theme or the main title. Yet it doesn't feel like the ordinary Americana or spaghetti
Right.
Western sounds.
No, it's not Americana at all, but it does feel. There is kind of a melancholy and a sadness to it. A lot of it. There's a lot of heartbreak in the story,
Yeah.
which is kind of the result of letting greed take over your life. You all of a sudden lose the things that you love, and that's part of the storyline of Yellowstone, and that's a big part of the music.
Absolutely. I especially love the piece Valley of the Soul, which I think it's my favorite piece of the album.
Oh, great! Yeah, right on. I
That's
appreciate it.
To me that's the best piece. Um, Besides using the orchestra, did she also use the close miking technique, especially while recording solo cello or
Yeah.
violin?
Yeah, I recorded a lot of violin, viola solos. The unsung hero of the orchestra, the viola. There's a lot of there's a lot of cello solos. In fact, the piece that you're talking about, that's this fantastic fiddle player, Vito Gutierrez, and he plays with such passion, and it's like I remember Taylor saying something along the lines like, give me what I want for this piece is I want to hear one crying violin. That's a direct quote. I want to hear one crying violin. And that's where that piece came from. And sometimes here in my studio, I would record closer more that chamber sound with solo cello and solo viola. And so I played a lot of instruments on this thing myself, a lot of mandolins, and I played the balalaika and the charango and all these different stringed instruments and bells and chimes and bowed instruments. And there's also dulcimer, but there's a detuned piano, a Bush and Lane that I used from 1920 that is actually out of tune, and as opposed to my Steinway, and they're right next to each other in my studio, and I record one so in Yellowstone it's a little bit eerie and out of tune. So all of those things kind of combined when I would record at Abbey Road with the Philharmonia in London, and you would combine these different sounds. And I also recorded a lot of great soloists. So yeah, it was a very eclectic and interesting journey.
Will there be more music to come, or
Oh yeah.
yeah?
So there is. We're doing season 2,
Great.
and very excited about that.
Brian, since we are a little bit pressed for time today, as I mentioned before, I would
We can keep going.
great. I would now love to talk about Crazy Rich Asians,
Yes.
your most recent efforts. And I watched the movie, I've listened to the album,
Yes.
and it's not your, let's say, ordinary Brian Tyler score. I mean, it does have your some of
Depends
your.
on how well you know my music, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I know what you're saying. I think it's not the first thing that people will think of if you kind of have a cursory knowledge of my music, if because it doesn't have someone flying around with a cape, it doesn't have a car flying by or some giant spaceship or a war or a battle, and so you're absolutely right. But it definitely plays to what I love, which is which is emotionally impactful kind of melodies and things, combined with that. I mean, something that most people don't know that I do at all, which is jazz, is big band music.
which I love. I think it's also the
They,
kind of music you don't get to write on a daily basis for, let's say a typical Hollywood movie. It always depends. And of course, I mean, I have followed your music for so many years now, and I'm familiar with your blockbuster movies, of course, but I also
sure.
know the movie you did with Bill Paxton, and of course with
Ah,
William Friedkin at the beginning of your career. So I'm a big fan.
yeah.
And what strikes me about Crazy Rich Asians is how well you combined emotional music, string elements, and also the big bands, jazz elements.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but before we get to talk about your composing technique for this film, what do you think is the most fundamental message of this film? Which characters or which scenes inspired you the most?
I mean, certainly the journey of Rachel, who's played by Constance Wu, is something that, for me personally, I relate to in the sense that she's she's kind of coming into a situation where she's the underdog, and she has to, fight against prejudices, and this is something that we all encounter in some way, and I think it's a universal message that should be, really highlighted in the sense that, preconceptions of anyone is something that really gets us all in trouble. And when the tables are turned on you and people kind of look at you a certain way, and without really getting to know you, it's something that really a lot of the world's problems are based on. So this sweet and very melancholy and heartwarming but heartbreaking movie really underlines a very important aspect of life on Earth, as human beings, the human race, right? It says a lot more than I think people realize, because the movie is so entertaining. It's so funny and it's so romantic, but it's also so heartbreaking. And the kind of coming from that perspective, the principles of honesty and standing up for what's right and all these things, while we know these things to be true, it is important to reinforce them well in narrative, be it a novel or a book or a play or a movie or whatever it might be, to kind of really represent this in a way. And I think the movie does it so well. John Chu directs in a fantastic movie. So from that perspective, I really wanted to tell that story with the music. And when I see a movie that I work on, I usually see it so many times that I become numb to it and immune to it. This movie is different. Writing the score for this movie, it's almost too personal, and it's very personal, not too personal. It's just, whereas I can't watch the movie without crying. It's impossible. I've never been able to get through it, especially that last 25 minutes of the movie. I just can't escape without tearing up. It hits me every time. I don't want to spoil the movie by giving anything away, but if you don't come out of this movie moved and kind of walking away feeling like, wow, I feel like I've been enriched, then I feel bad for you. Because it really it says something that's so powerfully true, and that I feel it was one of those times for me too where I wrote the music in a way that was just completely without thinking. It just kind of came out of me, and it was one of those things that I don't know if it'll ever kind of happen again in that way. And so I'm proud of everyone on the movie, and from top to bottom. By the way, Gemma Chan, who plays Astrid, is amazing, and there's another
Yeah.
great character, and she's wonderful. And they're all wonderful. I've gotten to know the whole cast. This has been a really almost like a family effort. Everyone from Henry to Constance to Gemma to Jimmy O Yang and the director, and I know the production designer. We all became a family pushing for this movie that initially the studios didn't want to release. It was initially going to be a streamed film, which would have been fine too, but it was going to be online, and to their credit, Kevin Kwan and John Chu, they all fought to have this be put on the big screen.
Yeah, thank God.
And we take the risk, and it's a beautiful movie, and it's more than kind of the category of romantic comedy. There's a fantastic drama in there as well that is as honest as it gets. So I'm very proud of that one.
I mean, I love movies that make me think, or films that,
Yeah.
that get me involved emotionally. And
Yeah.
if a movie can reach you on a personal level and also make you think, it's all the better. And I love movies that feature characters that are involved with each other, and if somebody what character A is fighting to get somebody else's approval, and of course that's also one of the elements of the film, and it's something that
Yeah.
it's something that most people experience and something we all share.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think what the film does is it emphasizes, look, you may be on one side or the other. Make sure that when you're on the other side and you're looking at someone new in your life, that you don't judge them before you know them. And we've been, I think all of us as human beings have been on both sides of this equation. And I think people forget when they're on they have the upper hand, that side of the equation. The thing that I think this enforces is that empathy is a good thing. And especially in today's day and age where you can be a social media keyboard warrior and criticize people that you don't know, and it's so easy to just take swipes at people and be a mean, cruel person. And we have certain leaders in this world, like from over here, that display a penchant for bullying and meanness, and you got to fight that with empathy. The way that we have evolved and succeeded as a human race is by understanding what each other is going through.
Totally.
And having empathy so we could be a social society that band together, and one person would plant this seed and this other person would make the tool that would till the land to get the seed and the whole thing. If we don't work together, it's all headed for disaster. So even though this is just a movie with a seemingly, very straightforward storyline and all that, it points in the right direction for me philosophically of empathy, which is something I think we need now more than ever. Otherwise, we could careen into dehumanizing others, which has happened in history a number of times, and it's something that I think we need to guard against, especially when I live here in the States and I see it firsthand. And so it's great to see when something like Crazy Rich Asians is a hit, and it kind of feels like, even if I wasn't involved with the movie, I would say, there's a strike for the good guys kind of thing, in terms of
totally
on the spectrum, But anyway, I get all.
No, that's very true. I mean, and nowadays, there's been this huge trend for years, actually. People are hiding behind their computers all the time, and everything is about, social media. And in this day and age, you got Facebook, you got Twitter, and the bullying factor has become higher than ever. And
Incredible, yeah. It's crazy. And I think everyone experiences it to some extent. I certainly experience it firsthand, where hiding behind the safety of your laptop, or your phone, and just being a horrible person. I think people think that maybe if they're nice to the people that they know, they're in their immediate circle, but they can go online and be a total piece of shit, that somehow that they're protected. Like that somehow that's okay because it's not in person, but it's not okay.
Yeah, sure.
And it's and I just, especially when you have kids growing up right now and they see someone that's in the highest office of the land being a bully and instead of calling people by their name, nicknames everybody some kind of rude put down, like is like name calling, like schoolyard name calling, it as if calling someone low IQ this, or
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know having to brand people. That's where it starts, and that's where it starts to go wrong. And so that's kind of just a personal uh, thing for me that's important. So when I get to do a project that actually crosses over into what I feel is important in life in general, it makes that project extra special. And that's why Crazy Rich Asians for me, well, it's also socially important that we haven't had representation for English-speaking Asian actors in movies. Pretty much you have very little of it. You have Better Luck Tomorrow, which Justin Lin directed. You have Joy Luck Club. But in terms of a major studio film, it's been a zillion years. So there's another great aspect to it, which we hadn't even talked about, but that's tremendously important. But I think it hits upon much more than that as well.
Yeah, I sure hope so. It's nice to see, a story of people, caring for each other, as opposed to being,
Yeah.
mindless and careless. That's, a big part of the day.
And if
Yeah.
that's the case, if people in the story, I think there's a place for that. But I think, like for instance, in Yellowstone, it kind of is the flip side of it. But what I think is so great about Yellowstone is it's not endorsing carelessness or selfishness. It's a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
saying this is what happens when you don't have empathy, but there are characters that do in Yellowstone, and they shine through, and that's who you kind of can relate to. If you watch Yellowstone, it's fantastic. But yeah, I think that's just it. And so it's important for me when I'm involved in projects to have some aspect to that, because to me it's not just entertainment. I think we have a platform for kind of shaping
Yes.
it's influential whether you like it or not. Movies and TV and things like that. That's a medium that is influential and
It
can
sure is.
normalize things that shouldn't be normalized, or can encourage things that should be, emulated.
Yeah. Absolutely couldn't agree more. And movies can be very educational.
Yes, I've learned a lot over the years. I think it's like compressing so much information in such a short amount of time as well. And it's using all of our senses that have input. You have narrative, you have dialogue, and you have music playing, which influences your emotions. You have these great visual aspects. It's combining all these things that on their own are hugely impactful. I mean, when I go to the museum and I look at some great paintings, or amazing photography, those things impact me. I'm just sitting looking at something that's not even moving, and it's impacting me and creating a reaction in me. But when you combine that with something else that you would go, if you can just listen to music and be impacted,
Yeah.
you can read a book and take in a story and be impacted. But movies take those three things: the visual, the storytelling narrative, and sound and music, and put it all together. I mean, it's like talk about being influential. I mean,
Yeah.
it's super powerful. It's
It's
almost
yeah, it's the best medium for me personally to
yeah,
combine moving images with music. That's what I respond to a lot, and it's just absolutely fantastic. I mean, it resonates with me, and I love it.
100%.
Brian, on a musical level, Crazy Rich Asians, I mentioned the big band and jazz pieces. How much of an effort actually went into writing those pieces? They are rather detailed. How did you
Yes,
find the right tone, and how
right.
nerve-wracking was it to finish those pieces?
Pretty nerve-wracking, because the thing was is that even if a piece was used for a jazz piece in the movie. Well, let's start from the beginning more. The idea was that it would have been a lot easier to just go and kind of license big band and jazz pieces from the past that have already sound very authentic because they are authentic from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even. But John didn't want that, and neither did I. We wanted to write themes within the jazz music that could also be orchestral themes that worked on their own. And this presented a difficulty or a challenge, which is jazz scales and harmonies are very different than kind of your classical romantic scales. So they had to be melodies that would work in both lanes. Like, for instance, Astrid's theme is done in a jazzy way the first time you hear it, but then it happens throughout the movie with orchestra and with very different chords, and becomes very emotional, where with the jazz it sounds very swaggering and kind of badass. Mm-hmm. The other difficulty with it, which was great challenge, but is that you can't just write a cue for jazz. I mean, you can, but I don't particularly like it. By that I mean, if you're writing a symphonic score, you can write a 30 or a 40 second or a 2-minute cue, which is fine. It can be its own thing. With jazz, you want to develop it. It's not, to me, the jazz that I use in there is almost like there are songs that they're written in the style of the 1940s, for instance, and I would write that. But in order to do that, I needed to write a full song. So, for instance, when Astrid walks in, I think it's maybe 1 minute and 45 seconds, that first piece that she walks in. But the piece I wrote is 5.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I needed to write the background of that. The full song needed to exist for it to be worthy to be placed into the scene. Almost like when writers and directors and actors are working on their character, they write a backstory for their character that you may never see in the movie. But they write this detailed they came from here and they grew up like this and and what it does is it makes their performance better because they have some sense of who they are. And that's what I did for every single jazz piece. That's why on the album you get the full version.
Yeah.
And I love writing jazz music. It happens to be something that I have done all my life. It's just most people may not have known it. I mean, early on in my career, I wrote a score called Plan B, which was all big band and jazz, mm-hmm. and Last Call, which was kind of more of a jazzy septet quintet thing. That was more kind of languid. But when it came to writing the music for Crazy Rich Asians, it was that idea of how do we combine themes that can be done. That's the one thing you could not do. If you had a tune from, a jazz great from the 30s, that would not connect to that character's theme when it needed to be on strings. It would work. The movie still would work. There's no question. But to get it to that next level, it needed to be customized. So it was a great challenge, and I'm glad John and Warner Brothers believed in me to take on that challenge.
Yeah. I mean, it's a score that also shows your versatility as a composer, because like we just mentioned, I think many people might not be fully aware of the fact that you have written or had written music of this kind early on in your career, because some folks might focus on your blockbuster-ish films, of course.
No, I encounter it all the time, even with executives at a studio, or a producer that I've talked to them, and they're shocked that I do this kind of music, even if they're in the industry. If there's one thing that you can say about me, you can say whatever. You can like my music, love it, hate it, medium on it, whatever. The one thing I think people would have to step away from is that something that I happen to love and have always had a knack for was genres that have nothing to do with each other. And I think it comes from me sincerely being musically schizophrenic in what I listen to. Yeah. If you look at my Spotify playlist or what I listen to in the car or whatever it is, it's so all over the place. It's ridiculous. And it is. I mean, it really does cover the genre. And so that's why I've worked in, my biggest selling track, it's interesting, or my most listened to track, believe it or not, after all of this that we've been talking about, is actually a hip-hop song. that I wrote for Wiz Khalifa. And I mean, you know, it's called Shell Shocked. It's from Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, sure.
And that ended up going gold, and it was a hit single and all this. And so I guess that's something that I can hang my hat on, that I really, it's not that I just kind of casually am interested in different genres of music. I am a fervent fan of these different kinds of music, everything from rock to industrial to jazz to different kinds of jazz. I love programmatic music, opera. I love Chinese opera. I love reggaeton, and I love all different subgenres of rock and metalcore and
Sure.
all different subsets of electronic music, from house to
Yeah.
trap, whatever, you know. So it's all over the place. But these are things that I loved so much that I had to, as a young musician, try to deconstruct and figure out how they were doing it. It would drive me crazy if I heard a drummer playing something, or guitars playing something, or even just something that was electronic music that was mixed, or some chords from an Ervo Parrot piece. Like, I had to figure out how they did it. It was just a natural thing for me. You know, that's how I learned harmonics, was listening to Ervo Parrot. You know, I was like, what is that weird high noise that's kind of out of, oh, it's the cellos and this one doing harmonics. What are harmonics? Oh, it's this. Wait, what's that sound in a house tune that is kind of, the keyboard kind of disappears every other beat? Oh, that's a sidechain, you know, compressor on a vintage keyboard, whatever. All these things over time, my obsession of needing to figure out how something was done led me to being able to jump around to different genres a little bit more easily than others, just because I had this, you could call it a problem. I could not rest unless I figured out how this the chord was harmonized, or even how the double stroke roll was done on the drums, or how to do the run on the guitar or the cello or whatever. I had to figure it out. So my whole life has been obsessed with just trying to deconstruct how something that I liked, how it sounded, and how I could recreate it and perform it myself.
Yeah. I mean, I know, it's a fondness for all kinds of music or musical genres. It shows in your scores. I mean, if I listen to The Hunted, you know, which you wrote for William Friedkin, it sounds totally different than, you know, Now You See Me, or Criminal,
Right.
or Frailty, which you scored for Bill Paxton.
Right. Yeah, they're very different. I mean, I think that's something that I am proud of, but at the same time, I think also maybe is confusing to people. You know, I'm not very easily kind of categorized, and I think sometimes as an artist, it might be easier to be identified with doing something in particular, because you can. I think we're pattern seeking mammals, right? And
Yeah.
we like to categorize and put people into boxes, because it's just easier for our brains to organize information. And so, you know, if you listen to Pantera, you know what it's going to sound like pretty much. But then if you go in a little deeper, you're like, oh, wait a minute, their earlier stuff had more of a melodic vocal line, and then it turned into Phil singing these like really screamy kind of yell types of things, became heavier. But pretty much, you know, it's going to be heavy. So I like turning that on its head. It's just something personally as an artist that I want to do, but I know at the end of the day it's going to be a little bit harder to sum up my music or my career in a simple sentence.
Brian, did you actually record the big band pieces in separate sessions? Did you like score all the big band pieces one day or in 2 days, and then the other cues in different sessions? How did that work?
You know, it's kind of interesting. Yes and no. Most of it was done on this at the same time. It's kind of by a technical reason. Since there is more stringed music, we needed to have extra sessions with the strings that were just alone. But we recorded the big band on the same day as you know, it was all together. For instance, we would set everybody up like that, and I am very fond of people playing in the same room as well, as much as I can. Like sometimes scores, even like dramatic scores, they'll record brass on one day, strings on another day, percussion on another day. And I've heard scores that work great like that. But for me, I don't know how to make that sound particularly great because I always rely on the fact that musicians can hear each other and they kind of react off each other. I think it's because I came from I played in orchestras. I was a pianist and a percussionist in orchestras, and I also played in bands. I was a drummer and a guitarist in rock bands, and also a pianist and a drummer in jazz bands. And those three things kind of led me to the way I would play is I would be looking around the room and even getting eye contact with musicians, but certainly listening to them and saying, oh, they're pulling up their pitch a little bit. Oh, that's cool. We're going to make it a little sharper sound. And so I'd pull up my pitch, or they're pushing the tempo a little bit, and so I would push the tempo, or they would get loud at certain spots that weren't written on the page. Just kind of, it felt good to do a bit of a crescendo on a certain beat in a bar that is too subtle to even write out. Just a little, little thing, and then I would catch on, and I would do it too. If you don't have them playing, the brass players don't hear the string players, how on earth are they going to know to do that? I don't know how anyone does it. Like, other people have been able to pull it off. That's more power to them. I don't get it. To me, it's just like, why don't we just have them in the same room, and then they can hear each other? That's my thing. So that's why I like also conducting, because I'm in the room and I'm kind of one with the band. I'm like a part of the band, and so with jazz, you want that. They're all playing off each other and kind of, there's some parts that you can actually hear it in the soundtrack if you listen close, like on Astrid, for instance. You can hear. There's times where there'd be someone soloing. There's a trumpet solo, and you hear me go, yeah, like in the background. I didn't even realize I was doing that. And sometimes players would shout out. That's kind of the part of jazz, right? Jazz is a little more rambunctious, so we're all kind of, and that's part of the vibe. If we were tracking that trumpet player on their own in a separate room, with a lava lamp, and it's all darkened, and they're just playing they're not grooving. They're not, part of the idea is that this to swing is like that vibe is how you play off each other. And even with solos, you're almost trying to impress your friend that's sitting next to you and, kind of one up them, and it becomes competitive, and it's just cool. So yeah, long story short, I love it when they're playing in the same room with each other.
Right. How and at which point of the production did you actually decide or feel that this jazz big band approach would work the best for the picture?
I think initially the studio and everyone thought, probably, and including me, oh, this is going to be it's a contemporary story. It's a romantic story. We should probably have a contemporary score, which means modern keyboard, piano, modern drums, modern guitar, kind of smooth, just kind of, that kind of score, maybe eclectic, kind of what we know is, kind of scores that are amazing, like what Tom Newman does so well. Yeah. In his scores, when they're kind of like, there's a certain sound, to whatever, that kind of thing. I could totally see if you just read the screenplay. I think that would be your first reaction. And then you see what John Chu shot, which is this throwback, old-fashioned, Technicolor, colorful, larger-than-life movie as if it's from like 1962, and all of a sudden you're like, well, this is a contemporary tale. I can see that they have iPhones, but this movie feels like it's in the 60s. So because of that, we thought, okay, we got to do a score that sounds like it could have been recorded in 1962. Let's do it very free form, not worry about getting it, a modern sound. Let's do it with we could take a time machine and literally have recorded this score. We could have recorded this score in 1945. I mean, it would sound exactly the same, with the exception of maybe a couple tiny things and maybe two of the cues. No, maybe more than two. But pretty much the heart of the score was perform it with an orchestra, piano, Asian instruments, a Chinese flute in there, and big band jazz. And it just was so obvious once we saw the film. You see the movie and you think, of course we got to do this. Now, was it a bit of a sell to the powers that be? Sure. We had to say, hey, in fact, we had to, it's funny, I saw the film before John, as it does, they'll show the people that are working on the film before they show studio executives and people, because they need to get it into shape in order to get it there. So I saw it very, very early on. So I kind of knew what the studio didn't know. They hadn't seen it yet. So we had to kind of convince them, well, when you see the film, you're going to understand why we want to do jazz big band music, because they're kind of like, what? But to their credit, they totally trusted us, which is very rare. I think they believed in John so much. They must have believed in John. It couldn't have been me.
That's good.
But anyway, no, they trusted both of us, and so we did the score, and I mean, it's been a fantastic partnership, and
I mean, it worked so well. I mean, especially one of the scenes in which some of the characters exchange several text messages.
Oh yeah.
And then the piece which you wrote for it, as it was called on the album, Texting Swing, it worked so well. When you see the sequence, it makes so much sense. But on the other hand, there might have been some filmmakers, some executives, which might have gone the other direction and had asked you to take a different approach.
Totally. No, that is the scene that the knee-jerk reaction was, oh, this is our chance to get in a big new Taylor Swift song. That is exactly the spot. When you have a montage, ever since Rocky 3 with Eye of the Tiger, if you have a montage or a Karate Kid, you put in your hit song on the montage. That is almost a rule of Hollywood. So to have it be score, and then one step further, have it be jazz. When it's the most kind of old school throwback big band sound that I wrote for that. But think about it. This scene is the most technologically advanced scene in the whole movie. It's showing a montage done with phones, people texting each other, but it turns into this big, epic visual representation of it, done almost like Saul Bass would do art in movies like Charade, and the Hitchcock films, and like a really throwback, where it has the pastel colors flying through the screen, and you kind of representing like almost like old school animation. So it's like John Chu and I think myself both feel passionately about taking things, turning them on their head, and so that was an example of the filmmakers actually fighting for something that we kept, which I'm glad that I didn't end up. I'm nothing against Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande or whatever.
No, totally.
But it's I'm just glad it didn't become just an easy spot to put a hit tune.
That would have been the easy way out, or it's a quote unquote easy way out, because I mean it's difficult to pick a song or to write a song specifically for a movie, but that's the fun of filmmaking, to figure out what works best, and
because actually the song choices in the movie are so great. Like there's some really, really cool takes on certain, like the Coldplay song that's done in Chinese, like there's these flips on these tunes that kind of are really, and of course the wedding scene with the, with the song and Kira singing it, who's a friend of mine, and it's beautiful. So there's definitely a place for the songs. It's just this was one of those areas that I think needed what it needed.
Sure. I mean, there have been so many movies, past and present, where songs were needed, and those songs were the right choice for scene XYZ. But I think nowadays there has been a trend, especially when you watch a movie trailer, they don't use that much music or score which was specifically written for the trailer or some other piece. They use a song, and there's been a trend that has been going on for so many years. I mean, I went to the movies last night, and there were 5-6 trailers, and most of them used the song, and to me there was no emotional connection, not because they used the song, but because I felt they used the wrong song. It's just sometimes I feel like, well, just use hip-hop music, just use something that's nothing. I mean, I like hip-hop a lot, but at some point I feel they're just going for the hip choice. They believe, well, it's gonna work. but there is no emotional or very little emotional connection to this scene. And the film trailer is like a calling card. It's the first contact that the movie makes with the audience and vice versa.
Yes, you're 100% right. It's it's funny. I don't know if you've ever seen the original trailer for Star Wars. It's kind of it's not that easy to find, but it is so weird. I mean, because we were so associated John Williams' score with Star Wars, to hear Wagner over it is it's just bizarre. Of course, that's with hindsight, but it shows you how important music that is actually written by the person that has been living with this story and very much been a part of the making of it, and kind of is going to be thematically closer to the characters and the vibe than if someone that never that wrote it 10 years ago, that never even knew the story, was thinking of something else, was thinking of their dog when they wrote the song or whatever, so that's why I'm always a proponent of writing original music.
Couldn't agree more. Brian, especially when it comes to the emotional scenes of the film, especially toward the third act of the film, or in the third act, do you feel that a composer, in order to do their job effectively, needs to react like as if they were part of the audience, and then actually score it in order to be efficient?
Right. I mean, yeah. There's so many aspects to it. You're balancing things on the head of a pin. You're balancing the idea of telling musically the narrative of the story that the director's trying to tell. You're trying to set the mood of whatever scene it is, which just the area of which you are. It needs to be appropriate to the environment. And emotionally, you need to make sure that you are connecting with the character. You also need to connect, just technically, on a technical sense, the thematic content with earlier thematic content, so subconsciously points you to the right character that might be in the scene. And then, emotionally, you need to be right on with the tone of what you're trying to say. And one wrong note can throw the scene.
Yes.
It's the responsibility of the composer is daunting, because it's not so much that you're just writing music for a scene. It's that I realize that I can elevate the scene, and even more so the fear that, of course, happens. I know that I could ruin the scene.
Yeah. It's like make or break.
It's totally make or break, and I think that is why. Often, kind of in modern scores, music ends up being very, very minimal and in the background and kind of doesn't say anything, because then there's no fear of ruining the scene. And that's, I think, that's playing defense. I can say that I don't do that, as you might have noticed. But it's a bigger risk, is that I really like melody through, even within a dialogue scene. I'm going to be in there. I'm not going to be like kind of hiding in the corner, musically saying as little as I can, so no one can say, "Hey, you're ruining the scene." I do take the risk of getting out there and doing something that might be wrong. But I think if you try to do it that way, you have a better shot of doing something right instead of just being neutral. And it's kind of a trend that I buck, which is the out of the way long note sustain score in the background that you just kind of blends in. That sounds almost like, I didn't sign up for this job to blend with the air conditioning unit in the background. You know what I mean? So that's not
Sure.
why I write. So if that was the case, I would do something else with my life. I would write music for something else. Or if I want to work in film, I'd do sound effects. But if you want to write music and do films, I think try to say something, and you may miss. I'm sure that it happens all the time. I've been
Yeah.
there, you know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's better to take a chance and try to explore the possibilities as opposed to just wondering what could have been or what might have been. Um, I think many scenes, well, it's like many scores out there try to support the scene. It's like, but they don't go all the way. You know, there are several movies out there when I feel it could have been much more. The scene is okay. It's not firing on all cylinders. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely you need to throw yourself into it and take some risks in order to really make a big splash in terms of not just the music, but to big splash in the sense to make the scene really work. I mean, at the end of the day, our job as composers is to just enhance and support the director and the movie and make it as good as it can be. But I think a lot of the best film music also can stand on its own, where you listen to it away from the movie and you can think of the movie. That's how I started getting into scoring. I didn't have DVD and Blu-ray and streaming movies. It was me. I would watch the movie and I would love it, and then I would go buy the soundtrack and I would listen to it on my headphones,
Yeah.
and I would close my eyes and I would imagine the movie. I would see Raiders of the Lost Ark in my head.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm the same. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and that's how I got into scoring. That's why I score films. So if you have sonic wallpaper that's drones and sustains and everything, that might work in certain aspects. But if you're doing it like if you did that for Raiders, you would listen to it and you go, wait, is this the scene when Indy? Wait, is that? Wait, this all sounds the same. I don't know what's going on. You're not telling the story. And it's just a preference for me personally. I like when I hear music to hear a narrative and to hear a story in the music.
That's what the audience needs to respond to. I mean, I know many people don't really connect with film music on an intellectual level. They kind of feel it. I tend to think of music as another character in a movie, and
Yeah.
It's so important to find the right tone. It's just
Yeah.
like it's just like editing. If you cut the movie too slowly, you're gonna lose the essence. The scenes don't work.
Yeah.
It's just too fast. It's a mess, and you need to treat music the same way. Basically, it's all a piece of the puzzle at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. There's pacing and narrative and storytelling and mood, and it's a very difficult thing to kind of intellectually, sort out and analyze in a sense. But I think it's an important thing to do because you can understand where you're coming from a little bit more, and as time has gone on, I feel like I have a better handle on why I do what I do, and at this point in my career, I just am trying to do projects that I can do something that is worthwhile, that I can tell the story in a way that I feel is fulfilling. Because I mean, to do a Yellowstone, I mean, it looks like one project, but it's imagine if a movie was 9 hours. That's like I did 5 movies.
Yeah.
And I had to turn down 4 movies to do those 5 movies while I was doing Yellowstone. So, that I would otherwise have done. So these projects, I think I'm fortunate to be a place in my career that I'm not taking projects based on financial reasons. I'm doing them on the basis of relationships of people I really love to work with, and projects that I feel like I can say something with my music, whether it's a small movie or a big movie or in between or whatever it is, and that Yellowstone and Crazy Rich Asians were things where I would turn down paydays for things that I felt like I could write music that said something, and I'm actually lucky that I'm able to do that. But that's what it's about for me now. From now on, I just want to write music that lasts, and I need to get that kind of out there. There's so much music, like I was saying, all these different genres that I love, and I only have so much time on this planet, and there's a lot of different kinds of music, and I want to be able to put that out there before I check out. So that's what I'm doing.
What's actually next for you? Can you already disclose future projects?
There's a few of them I can't, unfortunately, disclose, but the few of them I can. Doing something totally different for me as well, which is going to be fun, is Adam Shankman is a great director, is doing a movie at Paramount called What Men Want. And
Ah, yes, yeah.
and it's this groove kind of thing that's like really, really fun and kind of throwback, and it's there's again I've never done anything like this in terms of it's a music that I love to do, but no one knows it kind of thing. And so that's going to be fun. And then also doing something totally out of the box as well for Sony Pictures, Adam Robitel's film called Escape Room, and it is like the darkest and most industrialist analog synth score, kind of like Vangelis, and Eno and Lanois and Tangerine Dream, but combined with almost like a Gesaffelstein edge and that kind of thing. It's just but at the same time there is this searing, like really, really melancholy, emotional theme that goes. So it's taking these two things, kind of the very cold and the very warm, and throwing them together. Hard to explain, but super exciting musically. And then there's some real cool stuff I wish I could mention, but that I'm actually starting very soon. And that there's 3 other things coming out next year. I mean, I can say that, Justin Lin and I are going to be we're getting the old band back together for Fast and Furious.
Okay, cool.
And Justin's one of my longest, collaborators and that I've ever, worked with. So
great.
We're doing that, and he's coming back to direct it because he really was the one that revived the franchise, and we did Tokyo Drift and Fast and Furious and Fast 5 and all of those together, and so I'm so glad to see he's back, and I think he's an important director, not just from those movies, but we met on Annapolis, but he directed Better Luck Tomorrow, which was a seminal film, and definitely something that is the reason that we're able to do Crazy Rich Asians is because he made Better Luck Tomorrow way back when. So anyway, there it is.
Sounds great. Different question. Has there been any word on Now You See Me 3?
Yeah, that I don't quote me, but I think I think that's happening. I mean, I've seen that John is attached to direct that film, and John and I will definitely we're going to be working together very soon as well, there's a certain amount of directors that we're partners in crime, and I feel that way about John. So I'm going to follow his lead. But there's a few. He's looking at a few things, but that's one of them. I think that might though be down the road after In the Heights. So anyway, we will see. But that would be fun. I would love to revive that. One thing, I love magic and close-up magic just as a hobby, but it's really fun doing that kind of music. That's, to me, that it's almost like a mashup of fantasy, the more John Williams-y kind of magical vibe with the more 70s, almost Lalo Schifrin groove thing. That was a mashup of 2 of the most unlikely score genres ever, and so to me that's why it was so fun. Is this, you have these completely, and it almost is its own genre. So I want to be able to do that again.
Totally amazing. Well, I like those movies, especially the first one, but it would, of course, make a lot of sense to shoot another film, especially as the second parts already indicated, the ending of the sequel already indicated that there, might be more to come.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You know that ending? Yeah, that last shot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. See, I'm on the other side of that shot, but I know we left this like a cliffhanger, But anyway, yeah.
That's good. One more question about the concerts. The London one is the only one for this year, right?
Well, yeah, it's the only one that is announced right now. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's hope that we'll get to announce a full tour soon. I'm sure that there are many fans out there that would be, or that crave, a Brian Tyler concert.
Yeah, and we're doing our best to bring it to them for sure and make it special.
Great. Brian, do you have anything else on your mind? Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I think that's it. No, I think we covered it. Appreciate it. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking to you again. Brian, thank you so much for taking this time out of your schedule. We have actually spoken for more than 80 minutes now, and much.
Oh boy!
Yeah, we actually managed to go all the way again.
Yeah, I know. This will be great.
You probably have to go to another meeting right now, I suppose.
Yeah, I got a few, but yeah, all good. I'll skedaddle.
Great. Thanks again. It was so great talking to you again.
Okay, great. Yeah, you too, man. We'll talk soon.
You take care. Bye bye.
All right, buddy. Bye bye.